All right, welcome back. So we're going to move to a different feel in rock now. You saw that I covered the eighth note feel, the standardized feel in the previous lesson. And now we're going to work into a 16th feel, or what is known as a halftime rock feel. Now, just like the previous lesson, there are some different approaches you can have to this feel. Now, I will say that the majority of the techniques we're going to use here, again, because it's rock, are going to be similar to what we just did in the last lesson. So heel up in the right foot, big rim shot in the snare drum, depending on which type of rim shot you want to use, and then the different approaches to the hi-hat here. And in the hi-hat, we're going to take the same approach as the last lesson, which we're going to play some or a version of this with the Moeller technique and the accents. And then we're going to play another version where instead of having the hi-hat really wide open, we're going to keep it slow, but we're going to keep everything accented or a straight 16th note feel. And this was covered briefly in the first modern drumming course that you have taken or seen. But again, I'm going to talk about the difference between the two and when to approach the different feels with this, all right? And then we're going to get into the partials and the grid work and how to maybe move over to the ride and some different things that you can do with this, all right? So we're going to first start with the standard accented Moeller technique with the 16th notes. And here's what it's going to look like and sound like from the iPad. So the groove you see here is the outline of the 16th note rock feel with the accents. Now, I'm going to take this slow at first just to show you how we import the Moeller technique over the top. And just know that this is a groove that can really pick up and be very fast if you are able to utilize your Moeller technique at a quick speed with power as well. And that's the key. How powerful do you want to get this as you start moving up in speed? And that's something that you need to work on, even just individually working on the Moeller technique with the right hand, and even working on a pad with the two-stroke Moeller, doing 1 and 2 and 3 and, or in this case, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, and getting that moving a little bit. So I'm going to play this for you right now, and you'll see how it looks and sounds with the transcription. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Now that's just a moderate speed to get this going, but again, we're going to be working on the consistency of the accents and seeing what kind of level you can get up to tempo-wise. I'm also playing that a little bit louder, and as you know, as you speed up and move the tempo up of these type of things, you have to start thinking about the economy of motion with your Moeller technique or what you're doing with your upper body. Some people are not able to play this faster if they're moving as much. So the idea is to bring the Moeller technique down a little bit, or a good thing to think about is on your tap strokes back down to your Moeller accent, making the taps softer rather than making the accents louder. And that will enable you to get faster and also have that economy of motion. So I'll play this a little faster so you see and hear how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think about players like Jeff Porcaro or James Gadson and these guys who use this 16th note feel in so many different songs and with so many different approaches. And a lot of these guys really play this at a very, very quick speed, especially, again, approaching it in a rock style, not so much maybe a funk or other styles might be a little lighter, but playing a little heavier. A song like I Keep Forgetting by Michael McDonald is a great tune with Porcaro playing it, where it's up to speed, using this technique, and still getting the same type of pocket approach at a faster speed. And it's about this tempo, and it would sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, that's not the actual groove for the song. That's just the ground-based technique for that. I'll play the actual groove so you can hear how it sounds with that Moeller technique at that tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you work on this, the important thing is to work on these partials and this grid work that we spoke about, which we'll work on in just a minute, to get the foot developed against what you're playing up here with the groove, with the feel, with the independence, and also, again, pushing the tempo and how the technique works over the top of that as the tempo moves up in speed. The other approach to this 16th note feel is a more straighter approach. And you may have seen this in the first modern drumming course, where it was covered that it was more of a finger approach or a straighter approach, and that's fine too. Some people approach it with just fingers and moving, with this technique. Other people move a little bit more from the wrist. Sometimes it depends on the feel, it depends on the approach, it depends on the power, it depends on the tempo, all that type of stuff. So we're gonna just talk about that for a second. I'll display how those go. And at a slower speed, I could say that maybe you could use more of a wrist approach where all the accents are about the same volume. So I'm going to show you just a couple of different variations of that 16th note feel with all the accents. Maybe at a slower approach, we're going to use more of a wrist approach so that all the accents are strong and articulate with that wrist movement. I think of a song like Tom Sawyer by Rush, where Neil plays a very even amount of 16th notes, not necessarily with that Moeller technique, but it gives that even bed of sound, okay? And that would sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, there's always an approach with the fingers where if you want to play a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit faster, you can have that full finger movement playing this. And that would look and sound something like this. So it really just depends on the approach, on how you want to do this. Do you want to have a heavier type of groove feel, or do you want it lighter where you're just using all fingers, or a little more of like a steadier approach or an articulate approach where the wrist is there? A lot of it just depends on all the type of the whole situation around you, whether you want it to be more powerful, whether you want it to have more pocket. I have a tendency to like more the Moeller approach. Again, if the style is a little bit more groovy rather than just straight out full sound, but you just got to monitor the situation. Now, in order to get all of these to work to your benefit, then we start working on the partials or the grid, and that's what I'm going to write out for you and what you're going to see here. So I'm going to play these partials for you with the two different feels that we mentioned before. I'm actually going to start first with the straighter feel because it's a little easier to develop this at a slower speed, a little bit, again, more articulate where every note is the same volume, and the independence will sit a little bit better with every note being the same. First, I'm going to do it mostly with the wrist, and then I'll pick it up with the fingers after that. Here's how this would sound. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now moving to the fingers, same tempo, maybe just a little bit of a lighter approach. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we're gonna add the Moeller technique, the motion of the arm, and we're gonna play it a little bit faster to help develop the pocket, the feel, and also that independence against the motion of the right hand or your playing hand. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, you have to really look into the situation that you're in, maybe the size of the room that you're playing, maybe the style of music that you're playing, maybe whether there's more pocket involved or more just sort of a all-out barrage of sound, again, about tempo, about intensity. And you have to have different approaches depending on what it's called for. Now, I will mention that we can also do all of these over on the ride. And there are different approaches with the 16th note feel on the ride. For instance, if you're doing the more finger approach, perhaps you want more of the body of the ride so that it's a little lighter, as we talked about before with the fingers, and it's a little bit more of a straighter body sound from the ride. You're getting that full sound from the ride, and it's a little bit more of a staccato, articulate type of sound to hear the whole ride. It'll sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And notice I was playing eighth notes in my left foot. This was covered quite a bit in the modern drumming course that you saw before with the different variations of the left foot. At first, if you're having a problem with this technique or using the 16th notes and using the partials that we talked about off of the ride, perhaps you want to lay out with the left foot and then eventually bring in the left foot on quarter notes, upbeats, eighth notes against the partials of your right foot. Now, if you want to use the Moeller technique on the ride, as we used on the hi-hat, there's a few different approaches with this. If you feel like there's a little less sound to be needed for the room, maybe you want to use the Moeller technique on the body of the ride, where your hand is flatter and you're approaching more of a motion straight down on the body or the center of the ride. I have a tendency to like using the bell. The bell is great for a real cutting sound of these accents. When you use the Moeller technique on the bell, you're sort of pushing forward rather than down. You're pushing out for the accents, and you're striking the bell, of course, on the what we call the shoulder of the stick right here. And you're pulling back, and then that comes off of the bell a little bit, sort of next to the bell for the tap on the way back up to your next downstroke. So using the same groove that I did before with the eighth notes on the hi-hat, heel up on the snare, on the bass drum, limb shot on the snare, we'll use the Moeller technique accents on the bell. And that would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And a good practicing habit would maybe be to combine the hi-hat and the ride type of approaches that you have with a little fill, a little crash, maybe 4 bars each, so you go from one to the other. And that would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just as with the last exercises, you're going to want to try to practice that going back and forth with all the partials that I just used on the bass drum, the downbeats, the E's, the ands, the uhs, and put that into the whole sequence here so that you not only practice the connection between these two, but you're also practicing the independence and better ways to get the bass drum into your grooves more while keeping this technique, keeping the pocket, and keeping the sound. So, as we move forward here, we're going to talk about a lot of different types of genres that fall into the rock category, some of which you may not have even thought before. So, that's coming up in these next lessons.